So you have two challenges today. The blog, you're going to continue to build upon that, as well as HTTP server 3. Let's just talk about the blog part of this. So here we're going to be talking about authentication or authorization / authorization. Has anybody seen a diagram like this before?
Yes.
Yes. Devin?
Yeah.
Okay.
Just what it,
Yeah, like what kind of diagram is this?
it's just looking at the authentication between the client and the backend and where, like, which part interacts with what and what data is being expected in each process.
Yeah. So this is it's specifically called a sequence diagram. You'll see this in a lot of like documentation of like just like user flow and like where requests are being made to and all that fun stuff. So in the blog, in your guys' blog challenge today, you're going to be implementing authentication or authorization. So when you visit a website and you type in a username and password and it's incorrect, it prevents you from certain access to that site, such as like you're either able to make a blog post or make a comment, or you're only able to view the comments and everything. So with that, let me actually pull something up and just to show you kind of how this will work when you are working on this. So when you make a API request to localhost 880 or whatever your port is at to /login, and if you provide the right credentials, such as like username and password, it'll provide you a token back to the client, to the browser. And then you can store that somewhere in your browser, whether it's cookies or local storage or somewhere. And every subsequent request that you make to your blog, such as whether it's posts or comments or anything, any API endpoint that you need authorization to access, such as making a post or, again, making a comment, you can send that token in the headers under this authorization key and with the token attached to that. So when you send that request with the authorization headers, with that token that was initially you received back after you were logged in, when you send that to that API endpoint, like the /post, it looks in the header saying, hey, there's authorization in here, and it checks out whether that token is valid. If the token's valid, it allows you to make posts. If it's not valid, it will prevent you from say like, hey, you don't have access to this API endpoint or access to this specific information. So your challenge here is to implement that part of the blog. You can read through it. You can read through authorization, what the sequence diagram is. You can also talk about JWT, which stands for JSON Web Token. Let me bring something up, see if I can find it. What is it? Heroku. All right. So this is just a backend server using Django, specifically Django REST framework. So I did a GET request. Let's actually do refresh. Let's clear that. So this is just, think of this as just like a username and login that you visit when you visit any application that requires a username and login. So I visit here and I goes to token /auth. This is just what I use for the backend. And I'm doing a GET request to it and says 4 or 5 method not allowed. But if I were to type in a like Tom Preet and some password, and I'm just going to clear the terminal or clear the network and post. Notice how it says post 4000 bad request. It's because I didn't type in the correct username and password. Unable to log in with provided credentials. But if I were to log in, so I'm just going to do a refresh. There we go. But if I were to log in using the right credentials and post, so I'm going to log in. So, but I'm making a post request because I'm sending data to the backend in this field. And I click post. I get HTTP response, okay, post. And this is the response I get. I get my user. So username is Tom Preet. I have an ID of 3 and I do not have an email. So I sent back an email, but this user doesn't have an email. But I also received a token. And this is the token that tells my server that this is in fact me. This is me. So in any request that I need to, that requires authorization, such as to make posts, I need to send this token back in the authorization header with the request. And you can kind of see here, it was a 200 response. So any questions? What questions do you have about that? No questions?
So this token, you said you put it in your code and maybe use it as an environmental variable?
No, so this isn't an environmental variable. It's just a token that will be stored on my client. And then anytime I want to make a request that requires some sort of authorization, I will send this token with it. And that's
okay. So like local storage or a cookie. Gotcha.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and typically these tokens expire. So it can expire in 5 minutes. It can expire in 6 months. It just depends on how your backend is set up or configured and when you want this token to expire. Yeah, good question. Any other questions? Or what other questions you have about that? Oh. All right. So if I wanted to know whether or not this person is logged in. So, so here I went to pop-up platoon token off. This is what the backend API endpoint that I need to log in at. But if I want to check to see if this is like a current user, let's see, core/current user. So if I do that and inside of my headers, let's see if this works. I add a header authorization. So it already pre-fills there. And the type of token this is a JWT. Does anybody know what JWT stands for?
JSON web token.
Yep, it's a JSON web token. And I input, let's see, that in here. All right. Let's see if I send, let's do a GET request, see if that works. So nope. So I got HTML back, which is usually not a good sign. So if I want to, where's the body of the request? Whoop. So say I want to send, like, is it username? Hold on a second. I should. Core current user. Should go there. Let's see. Whoop. I want to do a post request. Core, is it standby? 1 second, I'm gonna look at some code. Okay. Whoop. So I'm gonna go to core users. I'm just gonna create a new user just to show you. So I think it is, so this is the API endpoint to create a new user. Is it username? Let's just say Tom. And this again, this is JSON. To see. See if this works. So I'm going to core users and I'm making a post request. I'm sending this data in the body of the post request. If I click post, there we go. So I created a new user. I received a token back. I can also log in by doing token auth with that new user. By doing tom, C, DEF 3. See if all right, cool. So I created that user. This is pretty much, I also received a token after I created a user, because after I created that user, I wanted that user to be automatically logged in. So just a reset. So I just created a new user. So now I've got that token. And now if I go back to Postman and I want to log in, let's see. Headers. So I'm going to need a new I think I went to the wrong API endpoint. To hell. So authorization, I need to put in that token in here. I'll need to say it's a JWT before that. I'm going to do a GET request. Is it to current user / core? All right, hold on a second. Is it current user? Or current user? There we go. That was the issue. So in my URL, my API endpoint for the backend, I was going to current -user, which was the wrong API endpoint. So it was giving me an error. But I'm just doing a GET request. I'm not passing anything in the body of the request, because you can't, because it's a GET request. I'm just going to current user. I'm passing that JSON web token in the authorization. I'm clicking send, and this is the user that I get back. So I'm not passing any, I'm not doing an username or password. I'm literally just passing that JSON web token, and it deciphers and it knows exactly my username, ID, and my email. And JSON web tokens, there's a bunch of different algorithms that can be used. But if I put in that JSON web token in here, it's broken out into 3 parts. And we're going to be talking about this later on, really towards the end of the course as well. It's broken down into 3 parts. The header, which is the type of algorithm, and I guess the token type is being used. So that's what this is. This is hash. So it's using this HS256. The payload, this data right here is what is this. So what's in the purple And then put the second part in between the two periods contains its hash to this. So it's got a user ID, username, when it expires, and an email. And then this last part is essentially both of these combined and hashed and everything into, that's what this is. This last part is essentially both of these values combined, hashed, base URL encoded, added together to make that. So no one can essentially break this, because if I just decided to make this instead of an ABCD of GH, so make this J and H, these two parts added together do not equal this now. And there's no way to essentially backwards decrypt it or whatever. So that's just JWT. So that's how it knows that this JSON web token, this token is in fact that user. All right. So you'll essentially be doing that utilizing for the blog authentication or authorization. Any questions on that? And there's certain so like, how does that token actually get made? There's certain libraries that will generate that token for you and send that back and decipher that token as well. So that's what you'll be doing in here. All that. Anyway. Questions?
So like, what's a use case for this? Like I'm a user, there's a web app live on the internet and I'm a user. At what point are these credentials stored in my browser?
They are stored like what, so they'll be stored somewhere. You'll have to decide where to store them. But typically when at some point they'll expire, because I don't know if you saw that like little expiration, this part. So this is an actual time of when it's going to expire. So it looks like it already expired. I can even test that to see if it expired already by doing this send there. And so, yep, signature has expired. So when that happens, because I have this stored somewhere in my browser, I send it, it says, I get some response back saying, hey, my signature has expired. So at that point, it'll either force you to log in or it'll just refresh that token. And then when that token gets refreshed, generates a new one, and then it'll get stored in your browser somewhere. So was that your question?
Yeah. I guess I'd need to see it. Like there's a web app on the internet. I put in some information and it asked me if I want to store it in my browser. Is that what happens?
Oh, no. It does that for you already. So there's already code that does all that, saves it to cookies or local storage or session storage. So that
it recognizes my browser and I don't need additional security steps because it's a recognized browser. Is that kind of how it works?
Well, yeah. So like, just like when you log in. So if you log in at Facebook, it generates a response, or after you make that login request, it generates a response. It sends that token back. It says, hey, this person's valid because you typed in the correct username and password, checks against that username and password in the database. It's like, hey, this person exists. It's, it's David. And then it sends back a token to the browser, and the browser then will automatically store it. Well, I don't want to say automatically, but the browser, Facebook will store it in your browser for you.
While your session is active until you log out or your token expires. Got it.
Correct. Yep. All right. All right. So let's talk about Jinja templates. So an HTTP server 2, actually, let's just bring it up. Oh, that's not what I wanted to bring up. Where'd it go? Is it even running? Localhost 880. Nope. There we go. So an HTTP server, you've essentially just been sending back, where'd it go? Responses. You've essentially just been sending back HTML as text in the HTTP response using strings, and then you're just putting in whatever variable you want in this formatted string, and that's what's being sent back here. So if you do time, does that even work? Yep. So you're also, so again, that's just, you're creating, up until this point, you've just been sending back strings of an HTML head title of string responses for HTML. But we don't want to just utilize HTML to send back, or I'm sorry, strings like Python strings to send back HTML. We actually want to send back HTML files or HTML, yeah, HTML files. So what is it? Was it jokes or? Or facts? I think it's because we want things to be dynamic. So Jinja is a way we can pass in Python variables into HTML pages. So where is it? Templates. And here is an example. So when I just went to localhost 880, it sent me back a HTML template that just says hello. When I went to /time, it did this, went to here, and it said, just gave me back the correct time. But in this HTML template, I'm able to input Python variables directly into HTML. So here the time is now, and then in double curly braces, I pass in a time variable. So where does this time variable come from? Well, it comes from Jinja2, which allows us to, again, inject Python code directly into HTML templates.
So it's kind of the equivalent of JSX.
Exactly. It's exactly the equivalent to JSX. So JSX is the equivalent for JavaScript, which we'll be talking about once we get into React. But basics, let's see. If I template designer. So you can read through the documentation, but essentially what you need to do is install the Jinja2 package in Python, and you'll import the template class from Jinja2. And what you do is pass in, or so you get template. Yep. So you create a template class. Well, you don't create it. You import the template class and you pass in an HTML file. So for example, here, I'm returning the template class and I'm passing in an HTML file. So for example, I return this template class, I pass in an example like the fact HTML or the fact template. So now I've got this right here. So here, just follow the code. Self.get template, I pass in a file name. It calls this function, I pass in that file name. The file name example is fact. So it grabs the fact HTML file, and then it returns this template class where I'm passing in that HTML file name in. So I come over here, I've got this Jinja, I spelled that wrong, Jinja template class. And then I can render this template, has a render method on it where I can just pass in variables. So the Jinja template, this template class has a method on it, such as like template dot or templates like fact.html dot render. So it's going to render that HTML, and then I'm going to pass in what variables, what Python variables I want to access in that fact HTML template. Except I need to pass a object in that render function, such as fact like this is a fact. So when it renders this, it passes this object into this HTML template, and it looks for any keyword called fact on this object, and then it will render this fact. And it renders variables in between the double curly braces. Any questions on kind of how that works with the Jinja templates?
When you're creating an object there, could you create, let's say, fact 2, fact 3, fact 4, and then other places in your HTML? Would it populate those?
Yep. So for example, as you just said, if I want to pass in a bunch of facts, maybe I have like fact 2, fact 3, etc. So here you can pass in an array as well. But if I wanted to render this array, I'd have to modify this HTML template. So this one, this fact.html renders an individual fact. But I've got this other HTML template called all facts. And now in all facts, again, this is, you can do all kinds of stuff. Again, this is just Python code. Try to think of it as Python code. You can run for loops, etc. So if I wanted to do like iterate over a for loop outside of any HTML tag, I can do a curly brace followed by the %, and then I can do for fact. So for each individual fact in facts. So here for each individual fact in the facts thing, in the facts key, render this list. The only issue is you just got to remember the curly braces. If any like Python code, like conditionals, if statements, for loops that aren't actually being rendered, we'll have like the curly brace followed by a %, followed by a closing curly or %, closing curly brace. And you also need this end for, so like it needs to know where the end of the for loop is. And then any stuff you actually want to render, such as like the fact ID, goes in between double curly braces. I want to see if there's, oh, right here, this is perfect. So this is a good way to remember. So percent or curly brace percent is for statements, and double curly braces for expressions, things you want to print out in the template. So you can loop through arrays and all that stuff. There's actually a lot you can do in Jinja, but this just allows you to scale things. You can even have templates render other templates and all that, but we won't get into that. But just remember, you need to import the template class. The template class receives an actual HTML file. And then off of that, you need to execute the render method and then pass in an object of whatever data you want to render in the HTML template. And if you want to see what that kind of looks like, let's see if this is broken or not broken. So if I did facts, uh-oh. You can see, so this renders the list of facts, and I can see an individual fact on each page. And we'll be talking about Jinja2 or Jinja and these HTML templates more once we get into Django, once we get more in depth into the Django framework, because Django utilizes Jinja to render stuff out on the page. Questions about Jinja?
What's your yellow squiggly? That's what I was getting on my screen.
It's probably just an issue with my linter. Because that happens. Yeah.
Problem I was getting to.
Yeah, that happens occasionally. I just ignore it. I'm sure there is something I can do with my linter to fix it, but it's been like that for a couple of years now.
As long as it works.
Yeah. Any other questions on Jinja? Again, Jinja just allows us to inject Python variables and Python code into HTML templates. All right. And let's talk about, oh, this is just another example of the sequence diagram. Let's talk about, where am I going? So that's what you'll be doing with HTTP server 3. And I think you started with HTTP server 2. But HTTP server 3 has you reading, and we're also writing from a CSV file. So it kind of talks about Jinja here as well. All right. So about GitHub Pages. Where did it go? Let's go last week. So GitHub Pages, if you don't have your own URL, like your own tompreet.com or danmiller.com to showcase like some of your projects or things you work on outside of class or just to experiment, GitHub has your own portfolio. It allows they give you your own URL to showcase work to the world. So if I go to tompreet.github.io, I literally just have this thing that's just says hello world. So you can host all kinds of different projects on here. Now, you probably can't host in-depth applications with databases and all that. I'm sure you might be able to, but you'd have to link to some outside database. But you can host React websites, all kinds of stuff on here. So it's actually really easy to get started. Let's actually try to create one for part-time Bravo or part-time Charlie Platoon. So all you'll really need to do, so you can create a project site or a user site, which this is what I recommend you do it using, just because it's less involved. But essentially what you're going to want to do is create a new repository that is the same name as your, let's see, as your username, and then do .github.io. So like part-time Charlie Platoon.github.io, tompreet.github.io. So you can just read through here. The instructions are really pretty self-explanatory. So if I wanted to create that, I'm going to say create repository. All right, that's all great right now. And now I can clone the repository like so. I can create some files such as like some index, HTML, CSS, maybe even some JavaScript, and then I can commit that, and then it should all be all done. So let's just go ahead and do that. So what I'm going to do, or create a new repository from the command line, or push an existing repository. Let's go ahead and create one from the command line. So I'm going to go to Charlie Challenges. Here we go. And let's CD. All right. So I'm just going to say like make directory GitHub IO, CD into github.io. I could touch index.html. I'll do some styles.css and some app.js. So I'm going to list everything out. I'm going to code app, index, and styles. So inside my index, I can just do HTML and add in app.js down here and add my styles CSS here. What should I add up here? Should I just do something, just say like hello world, or do like a number guessing game? I'll do the number guessing. All right, so I'm just going to copy this code over to the GitHub. I got that. Hopefully hopefully it still works. Let's see, app.js, styles.css. I don't have many styles. All right. So since I'm going to be creating a new repository from the command line, I'm just going to follow that, get init. Actually, I'll just also touch a README. This is my number guessing game. All right, so I'll do git init. So initializes a new Git repository. I can read through that, but it's okay. But I can just do git. I don't need to add a README. I already did that. I'll just do git first commit. So wait, nope. I do need to git add everything, git status. And now I can do git commit. All right, that's great. Now I'm gonna change my branch name instead of master to main. And then I'm gonna link that GitHub repository to the one on my local machine. Right there. And now I'm going to push this up. All right, very good. Now, if I refresh this, this is my number guessing game. Now, if you just read through, now I can just go to HTTPS, my username, which is part-time Charlie. So if I just do, and it could take a little while, could take a few minutes to work. Let's see if it does. So it's still not here, but it's going to take a couple minutes to update. But you can see the code is here. My action is do platoon.github.io. So anybody can visit this. Might take a while. Come on. But like if you go to my personal one, Tom Breed. It's Mike Lee one, Mike Lee. No, that's not it. What am I doing? I'm gonna go to looking for somebody else's who has like a bunch of stuff on it. Looking for a specific. There we go. So this is somebody, it's like this person has a bunch of different games on theirs. So it's got a restaurant finder that actually shows like need a hint. So see if this is actually up yet. Is it up yet? Did anybody try to visit it? Darn it.
I think you gotta set your repository to public instead of private.
Is it private? Oh no. Let's see if I can do that. Make it. Does anybody know how to do that? Make.
It's at the bottom.
You can go to pages on the left.
Where we at? Upgrade to make this repository public to enable pages. Yeah, I'm not going to do that. How much? 1,200? No. But this will work for you. Let's see if do we have. Yeah. That's weird.
If you go to general and you go to the bottom, it's in there, I believe.
So general at the very bottom.
Change visibility in the danger zone.
There we go. Thank you. Let's see this. Still might take a while, but with the GitHub pages, the thing said I need to upgrade. But anyway, that's how you do it. Yeah. And you can actually like post all kinds of stuff on there. So what does it say? Like, give me 50. I don't know how this works. Is that what I need? Get 50. All right. So yeah, there's like all kinds of stuff you can do on here. And you can actually see like who this person is. Whoop. J. I don't know. But so yeah, that's GitHub Pages, and I highly encourage you to do like create your own little portfolio website, or just start messing around with HTML and CSS. Try to get something up there.
I did a Jekyll site. It was pretty easy.
Was Jekyll, was that easier?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was easier for me because every time you push a project to it, like if you use one of those templates, GitHub runs Jekyll and kind of formats your code for your markdown. It makes it look like a blog site.
Okay, gotcha. So yeah, there's multiple ways you can do that. You can also create like a project website. This is a little more to do.
I think that's what I did.
Yeah. So this, you can create like a website directly from this, whatever the repository name is. So instead of just going to username.github.io, you can go to github.io plus the name of the repository, and it'll run your application or your project there as well. I think Code Platoon. I was messing around with like a React website. Yeah, so that's not up anymore. All right. So yeah, that is GitHub Pages. Any questions about GitHub Pages? Oh, all right.